Well, there you have it, the views of the man on the street. Well, let's bring you more perspective on the U.S. election now. Brooks Spector joins us from our Johannesburg studios. He is a former U.S. diplomat in Africa and an international relations expert. Welcome to the show, Mr. Spector. Of course, the U.S. elections are being followed closely across the world, especially, or rather including right here in Africa. Considering the commercial and diplomatic ties between the United States and Africa, what would you say is at stake for our continent in today's vote?
Well, good evening and good to be with you. I think there are two baskets of things to consider. One of those policies and those programs that have been securely bipartisan in their support, and then there are the others which may be somewhat more problematic. Very quickly, the bipartisan ones include AGOA, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which has allowed duty-free access to America of African products, and most African nations participate in it. Some have benefited more enormously than others, and some have benefited strongly, and some have had very little impact. But it's still bound as U.S. law to last another 9.5 years. What would be at stake in trade terms would be the question of bilateral treaties to be negotiated with, for example, the United States and South Africa, which would include such important and increasingly important things as financial services and intellectual property. The two candidates have had rather different views on international trade and expanding trade and trade agreements. A Clinton administration would largely follow its predecessors in being interested in international trade and in fact carrying out further trade negotiations. A Trump administration would have much more of a suspicious eye at international trade treaties or negotiations, and probably would be a much tougher negotiating partner, not necessarily a better one, simply more difficult to come to grips with. The other area I think which bears significant notice is the, how shall we put it, the international security arrangements, especially those that deal with non-state terror organizations in areas such as East Africa, in and around Somalia, and across parts of the Sahel region. The Obama administration has largely continued and expanded the policies that the previous Bush administration had in that regard. A Clinton administration almost certainly would continue them, if for no other reason that she was part of the Clinton administration for the first 4 of its 8 years, and these policies were in many ways her policies. A Trump administration is rather more difficult to figure out in that regard. It's clearly an administration that would be opposed to terror, but it is not entirely clear what kind of cooperative relations it would use to carry out any activities, how it would relate to the countries of West Africa or East Africa in that regard. Far too much of the Trump administration, or the would-be Trump administration's views on things have not been expressed sufficiently clearly for many people to get a very, very strong, concise, crisp idea of what policies he would want to carry out should he be elected. The Clinton administration, I think, is much more of an open book in that regard. One other strongly bipartisan area has been, of course, what the U.S. calls the PEPFAR program, which is U.S. support on dealing.
I'm afraid we will have to leave it there. Brooks Spector with that analysis of what Africa can expect from the U.S. elections.